Our next speaker is also someone very well known to this audience, the former Senior Anti-Terrorism Force Protection Officer for all coalition forces in Iraq and commander of Forward Operation Base Ashraf, working with the Mujahideen, Colonel Wesley Martin.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I noticed my good friend Dave Phillips choked up a little bit when he was talking about this surrender of weapons being violated, and you have seen me on this stage or other stages doing the same thing. And that comes out of passion, that comes out of love for our fellow people of Ashraf. I started to say warriors, they don't have weapons anymore, but they are the finest soldiers for democracy in the world, and they are covering the front line for democracy today. Today, the situation may not appear as serious at Camp Ashraf as a month ago. The truth, the situation is getting more desperate. Maliki did not provide extension to the deadline because he is a good person. He is far from that. If Maliki really wanted to do the best thing for Iraq, he needs to go back to Damascus. The extension came from pressure from the United Nations, European Union, European and Canadian parliaments, and the United States Congress. The extension also came from attention by international media's reporting and making awareness to the rest of the world about what's going on in Ashraf. Now, who's the real heroes in this? We have two groups. One are the residents of Ashraf. Those 2009, 2011 attacks, not one person broke ranks and left. They have stayed, like I said, they are on the front line of democracy in the Middle East. The second group is you yourself. I have always noticed whenever we've had these presentations, the supporters have come out in the thousands. As I said, Maliki is no good friend. These rocket launcher attacks, the same exact tactics was used at Tahrir Square last year when the demonstrations were being broken up. The Iraqi security forces pulled back and allowed adversaries to come in and attack the demonstrators. And it's not ironic, it was intentional that on the very night that the accord was signed, the MOU was signed, he began the first of 3 rocket attacks. The Iraqis weren't asleep on duty. They intentionally cleared the area. And I've seen them do that, and the folks at Ashraf saw them do that northeast of Baghdad when the Iraqi police cleared out an area, so when one of my convoys came through, it got ambushed, supported by the Iraqi police, executed by Muqtada Sadr's Mahdi Army. Yet State Department has not declared Muqtada Sadr and his Mahdi Army a terrorist and a terrorist organization. Hypocrisy has no end at the State Department. And we've also seen Maliki determined that he's going to go ahead and consolidate his power. A friend of Camp Ashraf, Tariq Hashimi, has been accused of running terrorist operations. He was as concerned about the Shia as he was the Sunni, and yet Maliki has the audacity to say Tariq was running hit teams. He was doing far from that. What's the way ahead? First, it's been hit hard. Let's get them off the list. They never should have been there in the first place. It was wrong. Second, let's move them out of Iraq. Bring them to the United States. We have the facilities in the United States to house them. Let the United Nations come to the United States to do the processing in a safe and secure environment for the United Nations and for the residents of Ashraf. The United States needs to be part of the solution, not part of the problem.
Our final speaker this afternoon is Senator Lucio Malan. Since 2001, he has been a senator and secretary of the presidency of the Italian Senate. Senator Malan.
Madam President Rajavi, dear friends, ladies and gentlemen, it is a great honor for me to be sharing this panel today with such distinguished personalities and with such an enduring audience too. And I am delighted to see that we all agree that the fate of Ashraf residents is not a marginal issue involving only them and their supporters, but it is a matter of life or death for the credibility of international law, for the rule of law in itself, and for the sacred honor and the fundamental principles not only of the United States of America, but for all the countries, mine included, who in good faith sent their troops to Iraq in the past years. It is essential to make it clear that the Iranian regime is engulfed in domestic and international crisis. Since the beginning of the new year, 28 people have been hanged by this evil regime. Despite severe repression, signs of public discontent have grown throughout the country. The ruling theocracy, in order to preserve its system, resorts to further attacks to political dissidents and to numerous terror operations abroad, especially into Iraq, and acquires nuclear weapons, trying to intimidate the international community also in order to divert the attention of the Iranian public opinion. This regime is not only a major enemy of the Iranian people, but it is also a serious threat for the world peace, security, stability, and development. I am proud to say that the majority of members of both houses of the Italian Parliament signed documents agreeing with Mrs. Maryam Rajavi, President of the political coalition NCRI, on how to deal with this regime that is imposing, on one hand, oil and gas sanctions against the ruling dictators, and on the other hand, supporting the Iranian people and their organized resistance to change this regime for democracy. And Italy is among those who are leading the way towards strong European Union sanctions as itself. Now, some 3,400 members of the PMOI, the main organized oppositions to the Iranian regime, have been lawfully residing as refugees in Camp Ashraf for the past 25 years. And during this time, they transformed this barren piece of land into a modern town. Despite written assurances given to the United States, Iraqi forces twice attacked them in 2009-2011, clearly as a consequence of Tehran's regime pressures, leaving 47 residents killed and hundreds injured. Despite the residents' legal right to remain at Ashraf, in order to prevent another attack, Madam Rajavi in December persuaded them to accept the relocation to Camp Liberty, provided there were minimum guarantees for their protection and well-being by the United States, United Nations, and European Union. For sure it was a difficult decision, but one that has displayed to the international community not only Mrs. Rajavi's outstanding leadership, but her uncommon wisdom and long-sightedness as statesperson. Nevertheless, Iraq broke its commitments and has prevented a group of residents from relocating to Camp Liberty with their vehicles and personal property. It also denied access to Camp Liberty for a smaller group to inspect the site before the transfer begins. Our committee of members of the Italian Parliament has supported the United Nations deal to relocate the residents to new camp based on the assurances provided by Mr. Kobler and US Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. Our committee finds the transfer of the residents to Camp Liberty unacceptable unless the minimum demand announced by Mrs. Rajavi are implemented. The residents' representatives must be given 48 hours advance access to Camp Liberty for inspections of the site, and the residents must be permitted by Iraq to transfer their personal items to their movable property especially their vehicles, to the new site. No Iraqi armed forces must be inside the new camp, whatever the reason or the pretext. International attention must be conveyed to this operation. I think that members of parliament and international personalities, as those who are here today, must be allowed as observers to these operations. I am ready. Ashraf, we won't let you down. Iran must be free, and may the time of this freedom be this year, 2012.
Your enthusiasm is remarkable on what has been an extraordinary afternoon of interesting discussions, calls for action, and ideas. I want to thank you and Madam Rajavi for your invitation, for your patience, for your persistence on behalf of this great cause. I just want to very briefly invoke my moderator's prerogative and very briefly speak on behalf of my fellow panelists to make two final points. First of all, I believe that we all endorse for the convening of a conference to clarify the MOU. Currently, it is clearly inadequate to the challenge. It only runs a couple of pages and does not provide the details that are absolutely necessary to ensure the safe and secure transfer of the Camp Ashraf residents to Camp Liberty. It's easy to see if you look at the MOU itself. It's a very short document. So I endorse, and I think we all endorse, a conference to be convened in Paris or Brussels or Geneva, to be chaired by the UN Special Representative for Iraq and attended by Madam Rajavi and your representatives, Ambassador Dan Fried, Iraqi officials, U.S. Embassy Baghdad officials, Ambassador Jean de Ruyt, the EU's High Representative, the UNHCR, and other European parliamentarians who have a strong interest in making sure that this project goes as safely as possible. The conference needs to draft a document that rectifies the serious shortcomings about the requirements, arrangements, and implementation of this relocation. The conference should be convened as soon as possible. But even if the conference takes place this month, and we hope it will, we should not lose sight of the larger goal. The single best way to achieve this goal is to have the United States delist the MEK immediately. The second point on behalf of the panelists is that I promise you, on behalf of all of us up here, that we will continue our efforts to have the U.S. government fulfill its legal and moral obligations to safeguard the men, women, and children at Camp Ashraf and delist the MEK. That is a promise we make to you. May God bless all of you, and may God bless the residents of Camp Ashraf. Thank you.